That's freaking awesome. Oh man. Wednesday evening. Today was a day where kind of everything you do fights you and is more work than you expect it to be, and it's frustrating. So it was transmission installation day on the 550i, which is big. We chased a little bit of wiring. We have the two sensors I've talked about a million times now. We've got the reverse switch. We bought a pigtail from an E39 that will work on the E60. It's the same deal. And then we have the crank sensor. Those were different. We moved over the one from the SMG to the 6-speed, so it should be plug and play. And that's all the electronic components that are present on the 6-speed manual E60 550i transmission. So we rerouted some wires, we chased some wires and ran some continuity tests, found two wires that run up to the DME box that we're going to use for a signal and ground for the reverse switch. Made everything neat and tidy and tied those and insulated those up with other harnesses that are going to run, unfortunately, from the left side of the transmission to the right side up over the engine block, nicely paired with the rest of the wires. So then we got the transmission, we put it on, and it comes within about 1/8 of an inch, the transmission bell housing to the engine block. And then you sit there for an hour and wiggle it and push it and move it up and move it down and push and pull and left and right and up and down. And holy crap, it will not go on. So you take it off and you look in there and you think, well, I mean, the clutch is 99% centered in there. Maybe it's a millimeter too far down, and that's all it takes. The transmission input shaft has a little dick thing on the end that fits into the pilot bearing, which on the 550i or the N62 is part of the flywheel, not the crankshaft. Every other BMW, like these M5s, it's in the crankshaft. No, this is in the flywheel, whatever, same deal. And the pressure plate, of course, presses the clutch kit or the clutch disc into the flywheel. Picture it as a sandwich. The clutch disc is your cheese or your meat or whatever you've got in the sandwich, and then you've got the flywheel as one piece of bread and the pressure plate as the other piece of bread. And the cheese or the meat, whatever, has to be perfectly centered or it won't go on. So we were able to loosen up the pressure plate, which is a self-adjusting clutch pressure plate. Loosen that up, use a screwdriver to just nudge the clutch disc up a millimeter. Then you've got to replace those bolts that hold the pressure plate on because they're torque to yield bolts and they're Loctite bolts. Thankfully, I had another 10 of those in stock, so we put 6 more on there, torqued those down to spec. It's 11.1 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. I don't understand the torque to yield thing. Just give me a number. That's a measurable number. 11.1 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees is 80 pounds. Just tell me 80 pounds. It's 10 times easier. It's stupid. That's ridiculous. Anyways, we got it on there. Finally, once the clutch was set up, we were able to line up the transmission, push, pop right back into the engine, exactly how it's supposed to be. And then you start, it's 10 minutes to pull each bolt in around the bell housing for 2 reasons. Number one is there's 2 socket sizes. So if you're like us and you don't do all of the E12s and then all of the E14s, you're constantly switching socket sizes. And more importantly, each one requires a completely different configuration of tools. Some of them you need a real short, just a ratchet, a U-joint, a socket. The ones at the top of the bell housing, you need 2 18-inch extensions to be able to get to those, plus a U-joint wrapped in tape just to give you a little bit of universal. You could probably use wobbles, but I don't have 18-inch or 12-inch, whatever they are, wobble extensions. Pain in the ass, they're on there. Tomorrow we've got to torque the transmission to spec, all those bolts. 2 of them on the left side where the right-hand drive starter motor would go have 15mm nuts behind them, so you've got to counter hold those with stubby wrenches. You're working right next to the cats, right next to coolant lines, right next to a bundle of wires as thick as your wrist. Pain in the ass, but it's on there. Tomorrow we'll torque that, we'll get the transmission installed to the chassis, we'll push the shifter up through the tunnel, put the back of the shifter carrier on, torque the transmission to the chassis, and maybe install the drive shaft. At that point, we're ready to finish the wiring for the reverse sensor, flash the DME, plug in the crank sensor, and start this pig and see if it runs. Then we've got to chase, additional coating and heat shielding on underbody pans and stuff like that before we're ready to call it quits, put the exhaust on, and get this thing off to the customer. So tonight, headed over to La Jolla, picked up Larissa. We took a beautiful walk through La Jolla shores and the public beach there at sunset, and then went to dinner at Beaumont down in Bird Rock. So awesome night, a little bit of time at her place, and now we're back home. My arm hurts, my back hurt, my knees hurt, everything hurts. I'm going to bed. Talk to y'all tomorrow, Thursday. Good night.